Okay, welcome back, everybody. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for coming to have another listen to another lockdown story. Today I'm joined by Neil Gray, author of Planting Light Bulbs, amongst other portfolio career options, I suppose, right? Quite wide and varied. But Neil, thanks for joining us.
Not a problem. Hello.
So, just want to get straight into it, really. I mean, people can check your LinkedIn profile to find out the history, but this is very much about the here and now and looking forward. So, firstly, how has lockdown been for you?
There's a good question. Not too different insofar as I do an awful lot of work from home. Um, Accessing other people has been a little bit more of a challenge. But it isn't obviously without a regular commute into London. It's not changed too much for me in many respects.
Is that your
A
your
lot,
usual mission? Is that how you generally connect with others? Is meeting up in town and that sort of thing?
yeah, so I'd go into up to town a couple of days a week, or some of my clients are in different countries, and was occasional international travel. But the fact that I haven't been for 3 months, it wasn't too dissimilar anyway. It would be per quarter or whatever. So compared to most, it's been having the kids around is probably the biggest change during the day, but they're very diligent with their schoolwork, so it's not impacting my work too much.
Yeah, no, I've spoken a bit about the schoolwork side of it. My brother has got two quite young kids, and it's just so hard work trying to get them to engage with schoolwork. Whereas, yeah, mine are much older and just very much self-sufficient, which makes life easier, right?
Yeah. No, it's they've been remarkably robust and disciplined with the change. So I don't know if that's the same for everyone, but also they've been given structure throughout the whole day. So it's not like others that I've heard of that know what work they've got to do in the day and race through it in the morning and then have nothing to do in the afternoon. So horses
Okay,
for courses, but
no,
no,
sure.
it's been pretty good.
What about your own routine? I must admit, I've found I've quite embraced routine in this period. I used to be very anti-routine. I want every day to be different, right? But I've been getting up at the same time, doing the same sort of things, getting ready, doing some exercise first thing, stopping for a coffee at roughly the same time, and I've just found that really helpful. Actually, maybe it's just that I'm getting older or something, but I'm starting to embrace routine.
I hear what you're saying. The only comment I'd say is that uh, weekends are blurring, shall we
Right.
say, insofar as if there's work to be done, because the difference between a Friday and a Sunday may be nominal. We're
Yeah.
not going out. I'm probably getting a 6-day week in now, and then realizing that my list that I get given is getting longer, and I haven't given it the time I should have. So,
Yeah.
uh, plus, I think also the recent bout of fantastic weather we had also it create. Yes, I have routine, and I've always keep a routine in terms of getting up, putting the work in, but. It's good to have the latitude as well.
Hmm.
Uh, the need to get my kids out or is the same on a work day as at the weekend. So going for a walk with a dog in the evening and all the rest of it is actually quite sociable. There are quite a lot of people out, but it, it's a new way of thinking that is has many benefits as well. As in that respect, spending time with your kids, going for a walk. Um, you don't normally think about it when they've been in school running around like a headless chicken and had double PE and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
So yeah,
So this
it's
we're
uh, it's a new schedule with a bit more flexibility and I think more time. Because you haven't got the commute or you haven't got school drop off, or you are actually. I think you have more hours in the day now
Yeah.
to and less interruption. So
And is
I,
that
I
more
think it's
more hours in the day to be more efficient, or more hours in the day to enjoy?
well, I'm more hours in the day to choose how you approach it, I would say. So it's
Yeah.
but allowed in a better work-life balance, because haven't got there isn't the issue about where, when, why,
Hmm.
what class, what extra school activity, what uh, who you're going to meet in after work. All those other things
Right.
allow your diary to be a little bit more fluid with the work you do on your own. As opposed to meeting other people. And
Okay.
uh,
Have you missed
you
that
know,
though? Have you missed the sort of social side of business?
um, have I missed it? I think Zoom and Google and Microsoft and all those sort of things, I've become far more relaxed with. I mean, case in point,
Yeah.
did
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
dress up for you? Did I comb my hair? No.
It's not.
It's
It's yeah.
it's uh, it's and it's spontaneous, right? You ping them on IM or whatever, on Slack or whatever, and say, have you got a time for a chat? It isn't sitting in a conference room going, where's so and so? I thought he said he was going to be here, and all the rest of it. I think in many ways it's far more respectful of people's time, and you can still be sociable. And I've seen far more jokes and photos and people sharing and taking an interest in people than you, even if you're in the next office to someone. So
Yeah.
it's brought out the good in people as well as the bad in people. And I think the bad you see is mostly on the news. I
Yeah.
really can't talk to the negativity of the situation in that respect.
No.
People have been very understanding and compassionate, which I think is two words you wouldn't typically talk about in a work. Is the driver. It's not about P&L and productivity and all those sort of things.
Yeah.
Different words come into the vocabulary when you talk about what has changed. I don't
Well,
know.
that's one of my big hopes for this whole thing. If or the legacy of this situation is that it clearly has humanized business interaction. Uh, can we
Yeah,
keep that going in a meaningful, one to one, one to many, whatever it, set of relationships in when we go back to work or whatever we do at the end when things sort of
yeah.
are lifted, restrictions are lifted.
There are unquestionably trends that were happening already, right? Working from home, you could go on the train or the tube on a Friday and get a sit down,
Mm.
whereas on a Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, there was no space.
Are you sure they
You
weren't
go
just
into
in the
some
pub?
Yeah, it could have been, but equally, if you go on to into many offices, there were more and more people working from home, and I think this is only going to accelerate that. The fact that the old command and control about people needing to be in the office, so bosses could see that they were active, they were doing, is rot. People have to be given um, the latitude to deliver against expectations. And I know for a fact that I work far better without interruptions, without people walking in and out of my office, without people walking past.
Mm.
You know, my focus is about deliverables. I don't know that it's necessarily true for everyone, but I think people will be surprised about the productivity that is being maintained, even though people have not been in the office. And as I talked about earlier, the fact that you can give people back 2-3 hours a day from their commute, remove the stress. Oh, you think about how the tube would have been in those
Mm.
days of 25, 26 degrees. Oh,
Yeah. Yeah.
those are not the reasons to commute. And that's, I think there is the opportunity for people to see a better work-life balance, which is
Mm.
only a good thing. I do believe that people have to have a workspace and disassociate from home from work. But that doesn't necessarily mean a long commute or to be surrounded by people who are doing work that have to be in your company.
Mm.
I've noticed, certainly over the last 10, 15 years, that most people working in office don't work with the people next door to them. They're calling other people in the organization
Yeah.
on a different floor, in a different location, or a different country. They're, the need for teams to be co-located isn't necessarily a prerequisite for a significant proportion of those people in offices.
Yeah.
You know,
Mm. I've seen that
obviously there
myself.
are, yeah, it's um, I think there will be more question marks about real estate and co-location,
Mm.
um, and uh, and I think the different characteristics will also rise to the surface in terms of uh, who is valued, not necessarily by. It's about deliverables and ownership. And if I went back to um, a less unified communication world where email ruled the roost, it used to really get to me how people would abdicate responsibility for work by sending in an email or sending it over, and it was basically out there in tray and therefore on to someone else.
Right.
I
Yeah.
think many of the digital platforms have allowed work to evolve. The fact that we have on-demand video, voice, IM increases communications to the benefit of productivity. Um, so
Can I just pick up on that?
I'm
Can I just pick up on that? Because you mentioned focus on deliverables several times, and that's absolutely at the heart of my business model with SkillsHive. And to the point that we refuse to talk about day rates, and because the moment it's about money,
yeah,
people start to go, well, I'm paying this, I'm not seeing that value, or
yeah.
I'm getting paid this and I want to get paid more. And so if we can get everyone to focus on the deliverables, that is absolutely how it works. Now, do you think then, based on what you just said about the tools of work and remote working
Well. Can I just back
changing?
up?
Yeah, go on.
Just in terms of, it's not about. It's about risk. And now you're right. I did touch on deliverables. You're right, 3 or 4 times. If you expect something of someone and they're getting the job done, then your expectations are being met and trust is maintained. When you employ someone to do a job and they take a long time, it is frustrating. If you are empathetic to their situation and you understand the surroundings, then maybe there are reasons for it. But in terms of a interconnected world where you work with partners, you work with other entities to deliver, the truly vertically integrated companies is largely a thing of the past. And therefore, as you rightly pointed out, it's not about paying a day rate, because that doesn't have any allocation of risk,
Mm,
right? I don't
mm.
know if I'm making sense here,
No, no,
but
you are.
if you pay someone by the day to do your website, you're not aligned. It's in their interest to take longer
Yeah, no,
because
no,
they'll
no.
get paid for longer. Obviously, I'm not saying people are driven that way, but
Well,
actually, what
some
you
are.
want is a,
Frankly, some are,
yeah,
and
to
that's a
put it,
shame.
yeah.
But my point was sort of slightly wider, which is, could perhaps the experience that has been enjoyed by people working from home and more flexibly for the first time actually change some beliefs and behaviors about what a traditional job is? Should they return to office-based work? May they take back some of that um, responsibility for risk and responsibility for deliverables to a situation where they perhaps didn't think that way before in a salaried position.
I think there's two things that flashed in my mind when you said that. The core of what you just said, I agree with, insofar as in a command and control world, and maybe that's old thinking. It may be still very prevalent. I haven't done a Gallup poll to understand how that happens, but um, in a in a world which is more team orientated, where you rely on others to collectively deliver against something, then what you own, or in a lean or agile world of development, whether that's in software or whether that's in finance or whatever, where your goals that you're collectively aiming for and openly discussing what your frustrations are and what you need to get done on a regular basis, I think it can be embraced just as easily, if not better, in the world we've been forced to endure recently than a one in which, as I said, in a command and control world where someone's continually checking on what you're doing.
Mm, mm,
Because I think a team and collectively getting somewhere is forces people to think about what they owe other people, and they take on what they've got to do. And if they've got problems, then they need to put their hand up. So I think that is becoming more of the norm. The fact that it's not location based is only amplified by what we're doing,
okay.
what is happening. Um, and in terms of relationships between employee, employer, there is a change going ahead, right? Because of the impact to cash flow, work, and many other issues that we're going through at the moment, people are losing their jobs,
Mm,
which is unfortunate. But it does bring about a new way of thinking, right? They they were in demand when the company was in full flow. It doesn't mean that they aren't in demand in the new norm moving forward. It's just that we've gone through a change, a hiccup in the way a lot of businesses have worked. Sales have dropped off. Cash flow has been hit. People are going to look at how to run businesses differently
mm,
and how they allocate risk. And unfortunately, there is a lot of having employees, right? How do you know if someone's going to be required in a year's time or 2 years' time? When you look at the cost of recruitment and you look at the cost of uh, um, of making someone redundant or not needing them moving forward, you need to consider how long people are going to be employed for in order to understand the total cost of ownership. It's
mm.
probably the wrong way of looking at total cost of
The
ownership,
commitment, the
but
commitment, yeah.
the commitment you make and the cost and the liability that has on your books when you haven't got certainty against the requirements of that role means I think most companies will have to think about whether they when they take people on in what was being called the gig economy to get something done, to get a job done and those deliverables done, and pay for the value of it, rather than paying someone every day, irrelevant of whether they're working at 100% or not.
Yeah, yeah,
Right? So I think it will impact how people think.
yeah.
It may revert to old and people may continue to want to build fiefdoms around them. But I think other people will say, look, I need a website. Let me get a website done rather than pay
Mm,
someone to come in and do it. There are so many specialists that can take on specific roles and capabilities. I think our that what we're going through will drive change, and I think
mm,
it will unsettle an awful lot of people because certainly older generations have a responsibility in their mortgage, within their credit cards, within their car payments, or whatever that they wanted a regular job. Um, but I think certainly the younger generation and how they work and how they get paid and providing value at every and learn as they go will see it differently. And I think that will be embraced more and more. So
yeah.
it'll
No,
be interesting to see how quickly it gets uptaken.
well, you mentioned about, business leaders or business owners thinking differently off the back of this, and I think you mentioned the people side of it. The other big expense and commitment long term is premises, and that was
Mm-hmm.
already in a bit of a state in terms of affordability, whether it's residential or commercial. Property
Yep.
is hugely expensive, and I'd suggest maybe the third biggest cost commitment might well actually be things like travel. And you know, I was talking to someone else about the positive environmental impacts of everyone staying at home being,
Mm-hmm.
way bigger than I'd ever imagined they could be. And you mentioned that you have some international travel as well. So is there anything about how you've maintained those relationships during lockdown that might change the world of work for you on return to whatever normal might be,
Um,
international travel wise,
yeah, the consultancy I do is typically driven by the customer. So if the customer wants me there, I'll be there, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
uh, do I need to be there in all instances? It's difficult because it's the intangibles that you never know,
Mm,
right? The knock-on business, the meeting with the board that drives further topics of discussion would never have happened if it was over a Zoom call or something like that. So um, uh, it's not a closed entity to make some of those decisions. But in terms of the actual work and the deliverables, I think you would certainly question it. Um, you know, um, travel, as you pointed out when you started on the travel topic, I wasn't necessarily thinking about the carbon footprint, but the cost of living for many people. When you have to pay a yearly rail pass of several thousand a year, whether that's on your salary, whether it comes out of your salary, whether the company pays it, those are real costs.
yeah.
And it's the same with the cars. Our cars have had nominal miles put on them for the last 3 months.
Hmm.
Um, and as I said, I don't think my life has that changed significantly. It may be different for other people, but I think all those things are actually good when you look at it in terms of carbon footprint and again, quality of life. Who wants to spend their time in a car or a plane or a train?
Mm.
Um, um, would it go back? I think, um, I was, when you think about holidays, everyone is going to be staying in this country for the summer. The large proportion of all of our summer holidays have been cancelled. It gets you thinking.
Mm.
What is the new norm?
Yeah.
Um,
And
even if you could get to France or Spain or get to the beaches, the majority of those people in France and Spain will be there as well. So
yeah.
I'm intrigued to what the new norm will be. But whether it's for pleasure or whether it's for work, people will have to think differently. And
Well, what
I
about economic infrastructure wise? Because it strikes me that a lot of I mean, we've already seen that the airlines are obviously massively affected, and
yeah.
what the long term implications of that might be haven't started to be discussed because there's far more important present pressing matters, right? But
Hmm.
chances are there won't be as many flights anyway, because the infrastructure hasn't been maintained, right?
Unquestionably. I mean, the, the vast majority of airlines are run for profit, right? So
On tight
they're not,
margins as well, right?
yeah, tight margins in a very competitive space.
Yeah,
So they were always looking at where demand was or looking at very specific geographies in order to be cost effective. Um, and the fact that the underlying costs and the payment of the aircrafts and all those sort of things are still there, they are going to be severely impacted, and choices will be reduced, and they will only creep back slowly. Um, and and as I said, people will look at how they manage their risks and their liabilities.
yeah,
Um, in the same way as we talked about office space or travel or anything like that. Who's to People are incredibly resilient, and a significant proportion of society hates change and isn't open to new ideas. And therefore, it always amazes me how much impact there is to change, but people don't change. I
yeah,
don't know if I'm
yeah.
made myself
So
clear.
no,
So
someone else said that. Someone else said
I
it's
wouldn't
only
be
been two
surprised if it
months.
goes back very similar to what it is. But
Yeah,
by the nature of what you just said, it can't, because there won't be those choices.
right.
But having said that, if lots of people still want to do international travel, the fact there will be pent up demand, which means prices will accelerate because there will be less resource available. It's just basic economics. But having said that, assuming there isn't another lockdown and another one after that in the years to come, that they don't come in rapid fire now, um, I think the nature of capitalism is that those needs will be met, and choice will rapidly come back if there is demand. So
Do you think though? Do you think maybe the rules might change slightly, or is that not even possible? So the we haven't moved away really from the 20th century sort of uh, capitalist paradigm in any real terms, although things have changed and attitudes change within corporations and that sort of thing. But it sounds like what you described, the two experiences of the economy from the business side and the consumer side, let's say, have come together more in terms of, well, let's get this balance, work-life balance. Let's get this balance in terms of affordability of housing, perhaps. And is this an opportunity to explore some of those bigger questions, or is that just never going to happen?
you're straying into a massive political, socio,
Well,
and
but
economic.
it strikes
So
me that now's the time for those conversations when we're
yeah,
sort of aligned.
yeah, yes, comrade.
I
The
knew that was where you go with this.
the I believe liberal capitalism is faltering. Right, and
Right.
what I mean by that is people are very cognizant of the destruction, certainly in the US and Western Europe, of manufacturing and the drive towards China, the rise of service industries, the rise in nationalism, the rise in defense of those things you hold true locally and nationalistic. You know, the rhetoric from Trump on making America great again
Mm.
is um, it drives change. You know, people think they can have what they used to have,
But,
and
but doesn't
that
this
doesn't.
situation counter that like massively, being that we're
Um,
all experiencing this one same thing in a way that
well, you
we
know,
haven't
where
on
I'm
a
going
global
with this
scale before?
is if it doesn't matter whether I'm in Oxford or I'm in Glasgow or I'm in Newbury or in the Outer Hebrides working for my company in London. That's what we've just said, and which I'm driving towards is if work is not uh, geolocated, it doesn't matter. So long as the work is getting done and it's of a digital nature, then the big question becomes is, well, if it doesn't matter if I'm in uh, 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 London, I can happily be in France. I can be in South Africa. I'm on the same time zone. And then in terms of value of the work, I think one of the other things that's happening underneath and isn't necessarily very thought about is there are very bright, capable people who are capable of doing the work anywhere in the world, right? The 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 fact that we used to hang on to the Ivy League and the Oxbridge and the Russell Group, most of those people in most of those universities I've just mentioned probably wouldn't get into any of the top universities in India, in the Philippines, in China, right? There is unbelievable skill sets, intellect, capabilities beyond the UK. And in the same way that we saw manufacturing going to the lowest bidder, you've got to question in a digital age where that goes, right? That's just a extend the line and put some prerequisites in to say there's no reason why it can't happen, and the only thing was that I see resisting that is culture and the resistance to change and many other things. So once you start down that path, how do you stop it? How do then many of the governments in this world are not set up, whether it be tax or rules or laws, in order to change much of what I've just mentioned,
Yeah.
right? Um,
Is that down to the 4 year term and that sort of thing? It's always a relatively short term horizon, right?
Well, and also the rate of change is increasing. So even if
Yeah.
they kept up with their ability to change on a constant basis, the fact that the world around them is accelerating means I don't know that they're equipped to do it. So even before this, there were clear illustrations of, if you want to talk about IR35 and the risk
Mm.
companies took on against using contractors and all that sort of, was out of spec with what the gig economy could mean.
Yeah. Yeah.
How the government was addressing the likes of Uber and other things where it was piecemeal work, and how to protect those individuals, or whether we talk about taxi drivers in London or whatever, is, they're always playing catch up and not understanding of some of the changes and the implications. You
Mm.
can't assume that liabilities will continue to be held and by companies, and the way they function, and how they take on people to achieve results. Um, it's Change is going to happen, and we collectively all need to think about the implications of what we do and how we do it. But
Mm.
I've taken a massive step from saying I think lockdown has changed how we think about how we allocate work and where work is done. Just assuming that everything else stayed the same, but it doesn't.
Yeah.
So if you want to take on a guy in South Africa, or even Morocco, what is the
Yeah.
value? If you're getting a website, you're going to look at their track record, their capacity, their ability to meet your quality standards. But ultimately, it's going to come down to value. And I think that's going to be an interesting question mark about
Mm.
um, how people get paid, how, whether you can trust the existing legal infrastructure about recourse, if it's not up, if it's not fit for purpose, what arbitration happens. All those sort of things
Mm.
haven't really been considered when it's cross border, cross country, the legal argument that everyone would argue it has. But I've had
Well,
enough workings with companies in China or Russia, and there are frustrations, and there are, and time to payment and all these other things. It just gets, it's gonna get interesting, more interesting than it has.
well, we touched on the concept of trust earlier, I think. I think it was, in relation to be trusted to deliver in an employee role. But I think in any of these types of value exchanges, I think, well, from personal experience, I'd much rather they are built on trust than litigation. But
But me too. No,
uh,
no,
uh,
unquestionably. But how, where I'm coming from is is you have trust with people that you work with, right? So the fact that they're saying, actually, from now on, I'll be based out of Newbury or Cardiff, over coming into London every week. That's one thing where you've worked with someone and you have a experience of them to build that trust. But then how do you have that same experience and understanding with the person that comes after them, when you know nothing about their
yeah,
work-life balance, their environment they exist in, their disposable income, their family life, a whole slew of things, because they live in this is, the culture in their country may be different.
yeah, and I think,
And
well, perhaps then, the takeaway here is that in terms of some of the humanization of those business connections, in terms of, if not an implied trust as a start point, at least an interaction where you can trust your instincts to go with some trust, coupled with the fact that for some people that have struggled to embrace the continuous and rapid change in the world, that the fact that they've got through this lockdown period, uh, hopefully in all right shape, may well give them the confidence to embrace change going forward. But look, I think we've covered a lot of bases there, Neil. I really appreciate
yeah, yeah.
your
Well,
time.
I think just to
One
cover on that
final
trust,
comment? Yeah, go on.
yeah, just on that trust comment, I think that's ultimately where, like, the trust in the likes of Amazon, Airbnb, Uber, it comes about from ratings from other customers,
Hmm.
right? And you know nothing of them, but if the majority of people are saying, love the output, love the value, love the quality, love the timeline. There are ways of building trust that
Hmm.
people are buying into now that have that are curated by independent third parties. So you can actually trust what others have said about other people and what they get
That's it.
done. But then there's other things that come into play in terms of identity management and whether those systems are being played. And there's lots of instances, whether it be on TripAdvisor or on Amazon, that people play those systems as well. But that's no different than sociopaths or psychopaths playing with people's belief and whether they can be trusted as well. So
Yeah, the
it's not.
system can
It's
always
just
be
different,
gamed.
right?
No, I see
Yeah.
where you're coming from. System can be gamed, but I quite like what you're saying there around, the data economy is in effect democratizing capitalism in some ways, because trust can be, the risk associated with trust can be spread, certainly
Yeah,
around
yeah,
when
and
it
it
comes to
doesn't
the
have to be
number of
centralized.
reviews.
Yes, yes, yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So all the stuff on blockchain and all that sort of stuff, and decentralization of some of these things means it's all technically possible to put an infrastructure in place to address what we're talking about here.
Mm,
Do those infrastructures exist today? Not not technically they're not a problem. It's actually more a business model that supports their evolution to meet these demands. So
mm.
um,
Well, that's
it'll be
the
interesting. I think change is driven by change, and we're going through an unforeseen. Well, no, that's not true. It was foreseen. Un,
Bill
uh,
Gates.
yeah, no, no, no. I think even in the UK, it was one of the major concerns that the last couple of
Mm,
governments have had, that this sort of thing would happen. And we had stockpiles. We just didn't believe it would be a coronavirus. But it was foreseen. It was just the general populace was unaware of the rate of change or impact. And
mm.
it is amazing how well many industries have coped and changed accordingly, but others have and on it, actually forget the companies, on an individual
Yeah,
basis, it has impacted many people and made life very, very difficult for many people. And that should not be overlooked. And they're the ones that probably need more attention than most. But
you're
it
absolutely right.
it has to drive change. So yeah,
No, I appreciate that. Lots of interesting angles and views there. Thanks very much, Neil. And look, we're still very keen to tell as many lockdown stories as possible. And I appreciate that it's not all been positive for everyone. And whether whatever your experience has been, if you've got a story to tell and you'd like to share it with us, I'd love to talk it through with you and put it on the Skills Hive LinkedIn page. So thanks again, Neil. Really
no,
appreciate your
no,
time.
not a problem.
And come back and watch another story soon, guys. Take care, everyone. Cheers, bye.
Okay, thank you.